Hello and welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to set the tension properly on your serger. And just one thing to note before we start here is that one thing I noticed that not many people mention when they're explaining about thread tension on a serger especially is to make sure the very first thing you should check and double check is that your machine is threaded correctly. Now quite often an overlocker, excuse me if I do call it an overlocker, not a serger. We call them overlockers here in New Zealand, and but I know overseas a lot of people call them sergers. Yes, so absolutely make sure your machine is threaded correctly. You'll see in behind the door here on this particular machine, this is a brother overlocker, lock 925D. Quite often they have the threading diagrams in behind the door there. Also consult your manual. The manual, if you've got it, will have a lot of information about threading and tension. So that's a very good resource to have. If you don't have the manual, you can probably find one online. Most sergers are set up in a fairly similar way. Normally a serger will have two loopers, so this is a 4-thread serger, 2 looper threads, 2 needle threads. Setting up a serger can be quite daunting. But if you break it down into small parts and take each step at a time, it's actually not too bad once you get down into it. With the 4 threads, you've got 4 different tension dials here to deal with, so it's not like a normal machine where generally you've just got your top thread to deal with and maybe bobbin tension possibly. But on these ones here, you've got at least 3 threads. Some machines are 2 thread. Some are 3, some are 4, some are 5, so it really depends what type of machine you've got. And the thing with a serger is that quite often you'll have it going perfectly and then you'll do something like change the thread here, or you'll change the type of fabric that you're sewing, and it'll go out of whack as such. It'll look like it needs adjusting. So there are variations in different threads and fabrics, things like that. The other important thing to do is to have some scrap material that's the same or similar to what you're going to be sewing. So that way you can dial the tension in properly on the scrap material before you start sewing on your project or garment. And also with the scrap material, you want to have the same amount of layers of material, generally. So if you're just sewing 2 layers together, generally you would have 2 layers of fabric. So I find that having a piece of material like this, just a strip really, like that there, I've just doubled that over. That's just a fairly narrow strip of material. That way when you're testing and you're dialing things in, you've just got a short run to do. You can take the material out of the machine, have a good look, see what needs to be adjusted, and go from there. You'll notice a lot of machines have dials like these here that you can turn up or down. So the higher the number, the tighter the tension. Some machines will have a dial on the front, a little bit more like a traditional sewing machine where you turn the dial clockwise or anti-clockwise. Generally clockwise is tighter and it also has numbers on the dial, and anti-clockwise is lighter tension. Another handy tip is to label each one of the threads here and under the tensioner. If you're worried about writing on your machine, you can just put tape over. I've just put sellotape over there, or clear tape, and written on the clear tape there. That way I can just peel it off later. So you can label each thread. So we've got left needle, right needle, upper looper, lower looper. Also if we have a close look here, we can see that the tension dials here are color coded. Now we've got yellow here for the left needle, and this dial here has faded slightly here, so it's gone a yellow color, but you can see the diagram there. It's showing what thread it's relating to. That's the right needle, and also here the yellow line here is the yellow needle thread, and then we've got the upper looper in green here, and you can see that that's showing the upper looper looking from the top there, laying across the fabric, and then you've got the blue here, which is the lower looper, which of course you don't see apart from the ends of the loop of the thread as they come around from underneath there. You can see down the right hand side there, lower looper. And you'll also notice that some machines also have these little lines in between the numbers. Now those lines there between 4 and 5 and 4 and 3, that's telling you that you should have the tension, you know, roughly in between here. That's sort of a normal position to have these. So it's giving you a bit of a guide as to where to start. So obviously, you know, so as I said before, lower numbers are lighter tension or looser tension. You can see there that there's no lines in between those numbers there. That's indicating to you that you're outside of the sort of normal working area. So that's indicating there that you're within Kiwi. Now, I've set the tension on this machine and it's looking good. I'll sew a piece off and I'll show you how it's looking. And you'll notice that not all the tensions are exactly the same. I mean, you might sort of expect all of the tensions to be sitting on 4. But after doing the tuning that I'm going to show you how to do to dial these tensions in, I've come up with these tensions here. So left needle on 5, right needle 4, upper looper 5, lower looper 4. And I'll show you a bit more about that later. I've also threaded the machine in the appropriate colours here to match the thread here. So I've got left needle on yellow and, you know, right needle on red, things like that, so that the thread colours match these colours here. On some machines there is a little tension release lever where you can push a little lever. There might be a handle on the side to release all of the tensions. Some machines may not have this here. That's really just so that when you're threading the machine, it releases the tension discs and allows the thread to run down in between the tension discs properly, so that the tension discs clamp the thread properly. So that's quite important too. That all sort of comes into threading. I'll link in videos that I've done on threading. So that's where I'm going to start at the moment, and then I'll go through and I'll show you what effect, you know, changing these tensions has on the look of the stitch. So we want to try and get a professional looking stitch here today. So let's get down to the machine here and have a look at setting these tensions. So I've preset the tension correctly for this machine, just so that I can show you what you should be looking to achieve here. If we have a close look here, you might just be able to pick out the yellow thread. That's the left needle thread, and the red, or sort of more like a burgundy, but I'll call it red, is the right needle. And the green that you can see lying across the top there, that's the upper looper. And if we have a look underneath here, we can see the lower looper there lying across the bottom. And if we turn the fabric over, you may just be able to see the left needle thread in yellow and the right needle thread in red, just coming through and no more. And that's what we want to achieve. So we want to have the blue thread here, that's the lower looper, and the green thread here, upper looper, meeting on the edge of the fabric here. This is what we're looking to achieve here, a nice professional looking finish there. As a good starting point, you should set your tension at about the middle of this range here. So again, take a look in your manual, it will explain in there where the middle range is, but I would say around about 4. On this particular machine it's 4 because, you know, in between 3 and 5 here where the lines are here, and I would say about 4, or some machines might be 5, but pick a starting point and then go from there. First of all, I'll show you what effect very low needle tension has on the seam. So if I just bring these down to 1, that's both the left and the right needle there, and let's have a wee look at what effect that has. Because when you're doing this tension setting, a good place to start is with your needle tensions. So really, if you see this sort of thing here that I'm demonstrating, you'll know that if you see it like this here, that more than likely your needles are set too low, your needle tension set too low. The other thing you have to be really careful of is you have to make sure that the threads are pulled right down in between the tension discs properly here when you've threaded the machine. And that's what I went through before with the tension release. That's the purpose of these tension release here. If you don't have tension release, you should pull the thread, make sure that the thread when you're threading it is pulled right down into the tensioner there securely. So grab it at one end, grab it at the other and pull it down into the tensioner there, like so, just to make sure that it's threaded through that tensioner correctly. Now if we have a close look at the seam here, you can see there that the yellow thread here is looking a little bit wavy. That's the left needle. And that the red looks, you know, pretty normal. But if we have a look on the back side here, you'll see that we've got big loops on yellow and not so big loops on red, but still loops there. Now that's a indication that the needle threads are too low, and you know, of course they are. I've set them purposely low here, but if you see that, you know that your needle threads are too light and you need to increase them. So let's come up to say 3. And another little trick is, especially when you're learning, is to only change one dial at a time, just so that you know what sort of effect it has when you do trial the seam again. So I've increased the left needle to 3 there, because I know that you know, 1 was pretty low, so I've gone up to 3 there, see if we can get rid of these loops here. And we can see that it's still not quite right, still got loops there. So let's go a little bit more, up to 4. And we're in the range here now. You can see where I've got the lines either side of the numbers there. That's, you know, sort of the range between 3 and 5, so we're within cooey. And you can see there that we're pretty right there. You can just see the yellow thread coming through there, the yellow left needle thread just coming through. But you can also see that the red thread is still not quite right. Still got loops there. So let's bring that up to 3 and see how we go there. So as you can see, it's a trial and error. And you can see there, we're looking on the bottom again, still a little bit loopy there. So let's come up to 4. Yep, and that's looking pretty good there. You can see the odd little yellow loop there, that's the left needle. It could do with being maybe a little bit tighter, but the red, the right needle, that's looking pretty good there. Okay, now I'll show you what it looks like if it's too tight. So if we head up to, I don't know, 8 for the left needle and, I don't know, 7 for the right needle, you know, way outside the normal range there. I've noticed that it's quite difficult chaining out here. It's very tight, and you'll see that the fabric's kind of puckered up there, so it's not looking very good. And if we have a look here, you can't see either of the needle threads coming through. Maybe just a little bit there, just here, maybe. You certainly can't see the red coming through. It's disappeared altogether. This is looking on the underneath here. On the top, we can see that the red thread is pulling very tightly here, and you can actually see the blue loop thread coming through. And also the yellow thread, it's a little bit hard to see in behind the green there, but the yellow thread is too tight as well. And you can feel it, if that was a long seam and I gripped either end of the seam and pulled it tight, it would snap those needle threads. So that's just miles too tight. You can pull it out like that, flatten the seam, but you know the threads are still lying across the top of the fabric there. That's just no good. Okay, so what you would do if you saw a seam like that is you would gradually just loosen the tension until you get to a point where you know you saw it before, where it is looking good. And that's a good place to start, is with the needle threads there. So I think we had it at about 4 and 4. Yep, looking pretty good. So we've got those dialed in. That's the needle threads done. Now, as far as the loopers go, a lot of machines won't like being run with the loopers too loose or too tight, so it's difficult to demonstrate that, but I'll have a go. You'll notice that I'm going to use this other little piece of material to follow in behind this other piece here, and that's just so that I don't have to chain out the back there, because quite often some machines don't like the looper tensions being too loose or too tight. It can cause the looper threads to break and all sorts of issues, so that's why I'm following it through with this other piece here. Okay, so if we set the upper looper to a very loose tension, let's see what effect that has there. Just follow in with that other piece there. We can see there that the top thread, the top looper thread, the green, has come right around to the bottom side there, and you can see there that the blue thread is pulling in and the green thread is let go there. Okay, now that's an indication that the top looper thread is too loose. Now if we go and loosen the lower looper thread as well, things get a little bit out of control, but let's have a look at what that looks like. Okay, so you can see there that the threads are, you know, pretty out of control. The blue and the green thread there, fairly out of control as far as tension goes. So let's dial up the upper looper thread. That's the green thread here to start with. It doesn't really matter which one you start with, but you know, you can start with the bottom one, the blue or the green. It doesn't really matter too much. Let's just start with the upper looper green. Let's take it up to 3. We know it's a fair way out. Again, it's a matter of trial and error. And we can see that the green is still looking fairly loose, so is the blue there. Big loopies out the side of the edge of the fabric there. Okay, so let's dial up to 4 for the upper looper. And we can see there that it's starting to look better, that top looper thread, the green there. So I think, you know, we'll stick with that, because, you know, the lower looper thread also has an effect on the upper looper thread as well. So we want to sort of start fine-tuning at a later point. We're sort of just doing coarse adjustments here at the moment. So let's start dialing up the lower looper thread, the blue there, see if we can get that looking a little bit better. Let's come up to 3 on the lower looper there. We can see that things are starting to look a little bit better, not so much of looping going on the very edge here. If we have a look underneath, still looking a little bit loose on the lower looper there. The upper looper here is almost looking like it could be a little bit tight, that green one, but that could just be that the blue, the lower looper, is just still too loose. So we just need to tighten the lower looper a little bit just to pull that green onto the edge of the fabric. Let's come up to 4 on the lower looper. Okay, that's the top there. Looks okay, but the bottom's not looking too good. It's actually, the lower loop is too tight now. It's pulling the upper looper around to the bottom. This is the bottom side. Okay, so I might have gone just a little bit too far with the lower looper tension there, so I'll just back that off, maybe go between 3 and 4 there. It's probably about right. And that's, so we're looking at the top here, looking okay, but still a little bit funny on the bottom there. Now I think that the upper loop is actually just a little bit too loose still there, so we can bring up the upper looper tension just a little bit, say to 5 there. And you can see it's gone a little bit too far. So upper loop is pulling a little bit too tight now. Lower loop is, if anything, maybe a little bit loose. So I'm going to come down just a fraction between 4 and 5 on the upper looper and just up a fraction on the lower looper. And there we go. That's the top of the seam and the bottom of the seam there, and you can see that the intersection of the chaining there between the two loopers is fairly close to the edge of the fabric. If anything, it's a little bit biased to the underside, so we could slightly tighten the upper looper just to bring that over just a fraction, or maybe loosen the lower looper there a little bit, but I think probably just tighten the upper a little bit there. And yep, that's looking pretty good. That's the top there and the bottom there. Okay, so we're back to pretty much normal there. I just want to quickly show you the effects of having too tight a tension on the looper. You know, so let's go up to 7 here. I'm not sure if the thread's going to hold out at that. It might break. Well, let's try 8. It might break the thread, I'm not sure. Okay, so so upper looper is very high, and you can see the result there. It's pulling the blue thread around and over to the top. It's also pulling the needle thread in. It's kind of pulling in this way and tightening. So that's the effect of tightening the green, is it's pulling in, it's pulling the blue around, it's pulling the yellow over. So not a good scenario there. If we bring this back to normal, I think it was about 5, was it? And if I go too tight on the lower looper there, obviously it'll have the similar effect, but on the bottom side. And I think it's going to break the thread. Just going to loosen that a little bit. And you can see, so this is the top. Looks pretty good, you know, until you turn it over. And you can see there, it's got the same effect. So the tightening of the blue is pulling in this way, and which is pulling the green thread around and over to the bottom, and it's pulling the needle yellow thread in as well. It's pulling in tight here. So that's the effect of too tight a tension on one of the loopers. Okay, so let's just put that back to normal, and we should be away there. Back to normal there. And as some of you may well know, that as soon as you change a thread here to a different brand or a different color sometimes, or a different type of thread, you may have to go through this scenario again. But as long as you're fairly close here, you know, you can do little tweaks to adjust for those changes in threads and fabrics. And also, obviously, if you're changing types of fabric, things like that, you may need to adjust these just generally, just slightly. So that's about it for today. I hope you found that helpful. And a special thanks to my new patrons on Patreon, Nicholas Nolan and Suli Liu. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. And of course, thanks to my existing patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help the channel out, take a look at patreon.com/sewing machines. Across there you'll get early access to some of my videos and exclusive content there as well. And thank you very much for watching.